always have to check to make sure there's no of your vampiric purple lipstick on your teeth before you enter a live stream, because that would be very embarrassing. But, you know, we have a nice stiff drink a la Jonathan Harker to make up for any due embarrassment. Flawless. Just the way we like it. Welcome to the Vampire Book Club. I am the Maven of the Eventide, and we are here to discuss vampire books. You can all hear me well, I hope. That we've been doing this stream for over a year now, that we have 2 years now. We have the technological issues sort of evened out by now, ideally speaking. But, you know, I have my trusty helpers here to tell me that if there's any technological problems that you think need addressing. Sound, vision, we can actually see each other now. Thank you. What am I drinking? I am drinking spiced rum on the rocks, no mixer, straight, in honor of all the hard liquor imbibed in this month's book. Just move my chat room over here. Let's see, there we go. All right. How many people do we have here yet? Is it enough to get started? I always want to make sure. Oh, 41 people. That's a little low. I think I'm going to wait a few minutes before I actually get started talking about this book, because if you miss some of this book, you miss a lot. So how is everyone doing this January? I hope you're all having a very vampirific January so far. Yes, I did change my hair color. I actually undyed it. It was dyed before, and now I stripped the color back out again. Thank you. I hope Lestat would be proud of me with my blonde hair. Count Chocula is actually an empty box of Count Chocula. There's no Count Chocula left in that box. I kept the box because, you know, you gotta have a Count Chocula box on hand. But Paul ate it all. I did not get one single bite of that Count Chocula. He ate all of it. Very disappointing. All right. Make this a little bit bigger so I can see a little better, and we can talk about our book this month, the Vampire Book Club, where we read one vampire book a month. Usually we meet closer to the 13th of the month. This month we pushed our meeting back, so now we are meeting on the 26th, which is 13 plus 13, so I figured, you know, close enough, it counts. We still have our lucky number in there. Paul regrets nothing, eating all my chocolate cereal. This month we read Dracula's Child by J.S. Barnes, not to be confused with Kim Barnes, I think is his other name. And I have the feeling that if Kim is his other name, because if you look up this book, it's listed under someone named Kim. He did it to avoid being confused with Kim Newman, who is the author of the Anno Dracula books, which are very similar in premise to this book. There's a lot of crossover there, and since we read Anno Dracula for our book club several months ago, I'm going to be comparing this book to that a lot, because you are all aware of that book, so we can actually talk about it in the context of its predecessors. No, he did not share the Count Chocula with the children. He did not. They got none of it. And, you know, I didn't buy it just for myself, but I was hoping the children would have their first Count Chocula experience, but no. The spawns, the fledglings, yeah, no, they got none. No Count Chocula for them. None for Dracula's Child. Oh, I miss NYC too. So Dracula's Child is a spooky, inventive, says Mark Gatiss, co-creator of the BBC series Dracula and Sherlock, that guy, a spooky and creative sequel to Dracula. So if you have not read the original Dracula by Bram Stoker, you may be a little lost reading this book. You probably could read this book just fine. If you have just general knowledge of Dracula, all you really need to know is that Dracula tried to come to England and eat a bunch of people, and he was stopped by a group of people, and that group of people consisted of Mina, Jonathan Harker, Lucy, Lucy's three boyfriends, Lord Holmwelt, Arthur, Jack Seward, the psychiatrist, and Quincy Morris, the American cowboy, and Abraham Van Helsing. And when that group of people went to defeat Dracula, they chased him down to Transylvania, they fought him, they defeated him, except Lucy, she died real hard. Quincy, the American cowboy, died in combat. He was the casualty of the group. So when Quincy died, a hero, slaying Dracula, Dracula poofed into ashes, went up in smoke, he completely died. Dracula is no more. Everybody wins. Mina, who had been tainted by Dracula because she drank some of his blood, it like magically falls off her. She had this scar on her head from a communion wafer. It magically dissolves. She's turned back human. She's completely normal again, which is where you get the idea of like when you kill the master vampire, all the other vampires turn back human again, right? So that happens. And then Dracula, the original book, ends with 1 year to the day of Dracula's defeat, we bore a son. And Mina and Jonathan, who are married, have a son, and they name him Quincy after the American cowboy who died. So Quincy Harker is Jonathan Mina's son, who's born a year after Dracula's death. So, you know, she got pregnant with him 3 months after Dracula's death, right? Like, there's a lot of fanfic out there that's like, oh, Quincy's actually Dracula's kid, but the timing doesn't work. Unless vampire babies gestate for a year instead of 9 months, he can't be Dracula's child, right? So I'm like, how is this going to be Dracula's child? Because this is Quincy Harker. He is the child in question. How is he going to be Dracula's child? Let's find out. So the first thing you notice about this book is that it's told in epistolary format, which is the same way the original Dracula is told. We start with Mina's diary. It's a lot of diary entries, some letters to each other, some newspaper articles, but mostly diary entries, a lot more focused on the diaries than the original Dracula was. Dracula was more of a hodgepodge. We still have Mina, her husband Jonathan, Lord Arthur Holmwood, Godalming, he's Lord Godalming now, Jack Seward, the psychiatrist, and Van Helsing, the Van Helsing. And the book starts with all of them with a diary entry from Mina's point of view. It's her son Quincy's 12th birthday, so it's now been officially 13 years since Dracula died. And as we know, 13 is our lucky number, so something's going to happen on the 13th anniversary of Dracula's death. It's Quincy's birthday. They're having a birthday party for him. Everybody comes. All the old vampire hunters come because apparently those are their only friends. And Arthur brings his new wife. Her name is Caroline. And we find out later that Caroline used to be a mental patient under Dr. Seward's care. She's a recovered mental patient, but she is like sort of a little crazy, a little weird. We don't know if it's real or if it's one of those like Victorian times things where they would just put women in mental asylums because they were being too womanly, and not submitting to the patriarchy enough. We don't know, but she's a little out there. She's a little strange. Yeah, so Quincy is now turning 12. It's his 12th birthday. But the night ends in tragedy when Van Helsing has like a seizure or something, and he falls down and like blood spurts out of his mouth. It seems very weird and supernatural. It doesn't seem like an epileptic fit or like a stroke like a regular old man might have. But no, apparently he just like has a stroke. He's old, he's dying, he has a stroke, he collapses, he goes unconscious. And in doing so, he squashes a kitten that the little boy had gotten for his birthday. So, we start off with kitten murder, and that's how the story begins. So Van Helsing is now in a coma, and they put him up in the room in the Harker's house, and he stays there to serve out his coma. And they're like, is he going to wake up? Is he going to die? We don't know. So they're kind of nursing him, and they don't know what's going to happen. Meanwhile, we meet some new characters. So the new characters we meet are these two English gentlemen who are touring Europe. They're doing the English gentleman thing of where they just kind of like go, gallivant around the continent and have sex with as many people as they can and tour the sites and meet the locals and so forth. And one of them, his name is Maurice Hallam, and he is a retired Shakespearean actor. And he is very, very gay. And when he's hanging out in the gay district of this town he's in, he sees this other English guy who's this like hot young guy also hanging out there with the local, sex workers that they've purchased. And he's like, who's that Englishman who is obviously also gay because he's here in this district with me? And then, he leaves town. And turns out that the hot young English guy also left town and went to the same exact place he went to, which seems very coincidental and supernatural. So I'm like, this hot young guy, he's obviously like a vampire or something, right? Like something is up with him. So they end up in the same like small, quaint Transylvanian village just at the base of the mountain where Dracula's castle is. And they're hanging out this Transylvanian village, not having sex because the young guy doesn't want to actually have sex, but he's like, you know, we could do stuff. You can like watch me get naked and stuff, but we won't actually have sex. But they're in a relationship, you know, they're in their nice like queer relationship. But he's weird. He can do weird things like talk to wolves, and there's like a weird wolf following him around, and then he tells the wolves to go away, and they leave, and Maurice is like, how did you do that? And he's like, I don't know. I'm like, he's obviously a vampire. Turns out I was wrong. No, he just coincidentally there, you know, whatever. But while they're out in this village, they're getting bored. And they're like, we want some adventure. We want to go do things. And the young guy's like, I need a purpose in my life. I'm just like an English gentleman gallivanting around being gay, and I have no purpose. I need some higher calling. So they go to like the Rough Tavern at the edge of town, and the landlady's like, oh, good sir, don't go over there. There's bad people over there. And they're like, what's the worst that could happen? We're English. So they go over there, and a lady who's like the hottest lady they've ever seen, but they're gay, so it doesn't really matter. She walks into the bar, and she goes right up to them, and she's like, I heard you two are looking for adventure. Want to come up into the mountains with me and go to Dracula's castle? It'll be really adventurous, I promise. And they're like, yeah, man, that sounds fun. Well, the young guy is. Maurice is kind of like, I'm old and fat, and I don't want to do this, but I'm so in love with this guy that I would follow him anywhere. So he agrees to go on this adventure. So while they're going off on this adventure, meanwhile, back in England, Mina and Jonathan are trying to care for the very sick Van Helsing. Jonathan has been drinking a lot of very stiff drinks, and Mina is very, very judgy of his drinking. She's like, I know he went through a really traumatic time 13 years ago, but it's been 13 years. Could he just lay off the sauce and be a good husband for once? And he's like, I have so much shame. I cannot. I must drink. And Quincy is being really weird. He's like this really weird kid. But for a book called Dracula's Child, which we learned at the beginning was the person who put together all these letters and diary entries into a book was Quincy himself when he's an adult. So we know that as an adult he gathered this, but none of them are from his point of view, and none of them really know what's going on with him. So for a book called Dracula's Child, he's barely even in the book at all. He's more of a MacGuffin than anything. So Dr. Seward, the psychiatrist, sends a nurse that works in his practice out to stay with them. Her name is Sarah Ann Dowell. And he's like, I'm sending this nurse out to help you nurse Van Helsing because, you know, it's really hard to like nurse a coma patient when you've got lives of your own to lead. And we find out that he sent her out because he was kind of in love with her, and he's like, that's wrong. I'm an old man. She's a young girl, and she's my employee. It's wrong for me to be in love with her, so I'm just going to send her away from me. It'll be fine. So we get this new character, Sarah Ann, and we get a lot from her point of view of what's going on in the house while she's nursing Van Helsing. And she is a good nurse. We find out she has a boyfriend who's like a gang member back home. There's like these London street gangs, and he's one of them. Yes, Dracula's Child is very much like Danny from The Shining. So Sarah's boyfriend back home, she's writing him all these letters saying like, I know you're a gang member, but try to be good, and I love you, and just remember, if you want to go back to your gang ways, just don't. And he never writes her back. And we find out later, this is because he's been arrested, because the other point of view we get is the commissioner of the police, and his name is Ambrose Pierce. And he is the commissioner of the police, and we find out that one of his chief detectives has been summoned home to his dying wife's bed, his estranged wife, and his daughter has called him home and says like, your wife is dying. I know that you're not divorced because we don't do that here, but you're separated, but please come home because she's dying. So he has to leave. Is this Love Never Dies with a gay subplot? Thank you, JRL Studios, for the $4.99. I wish that would have been a lot more fun. Like, so far, okay, right, at this point in the book, I'm digging it. I love the style. I love the words used. It's written in a very Victorian prose style. It reads like it could have been written by Bram Stoker. The person obviously uses a thesaurus. They know their Victorian slang. They know, like, the metaphors that they would use. The writing is great. And I'm really digging this book so far at this point, right? I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going on. I like the gay guys going out in the woods. I don't like the sexy lady vampire who just shows up out of nowhere and is just like super slutty and sexy and obviously a vampire. I thought she was very cheesy, but other than that, I'm digging it so far. Like the police guys who's going back home to his estranged wife. And then we find out that he leaves in charge his American sidekick. So I'm like, oh, we get a new, like, American, like, macho guy who, instead of a cowboy, now he's a cop. We get an American cop working in England for Scotland Yard. Okay, we got, like, our replacement American character. The other new character we're introduced to is a retired newspaper editor. And he works for one of these main newspapers, or he used to work for a main newspaper in London. He's since retired, and he's sort of, like, given up on life. His wife is dead. He has nothing left to live for. He decides he is going to take his own life. So his first missive is a suicide note that he leaves. And when he goes out to try to commit suicide, he is stopped by a lord of the House of Lords, who's like, hi, I'm in Parliament. I work in the House of Lords. Why are you killing yourself? And he's like, because this country has gone to shit. Like, this country is terrible. It's full of, like, these soft, namby-pamby snowflakes who just want to be coddled and they don't know how to be men anymore. And I just can't take the horrible direction our country's going in. I have nothing left to live for. And the Lord, his name's Lord Tanglemere, he's like, but what if we could change that? What if we could make Britain great again? You know, give everyone red hats and, like, bring us back to the old ways of, like, the patriarchy where men aren't, like, soft and squishy anymore. And this guy's like, well, maybe that would be worth living for. I'm listening. So he talks to him and he's like, you as a former newspaper person, you can help us in Parliament make this change come about. And we have learned already that there is this, like, old brotherhood society, kind of like a Masonic society, like the Illuminati, basically, of the House of Lords in Parliament, called something faction. And there's a lot of the lords that are part of it, and Lord Godalming Arthur Holmwood technically would be the leader of it if it would ever come to power. And he was talking earlier about how he really thinks it's stupid. He thinks it's just a ceremonial body. It can't really do anything. But if it were to come to power, it could do stuff if it wanted to. So we know this exists. So we find out that this Tanglemere guy is trying to make this faction come to be, kind of like to take over Parliament, but he needs help to do that. He wants this newspaper guy to help him. So they come up with this ploy where he's going to start writing articles for the newspaper, trying to urge the population to be like, yeah, Britain is getting soft, England is soft, and we need to go back to being macho and tough, and, you know, parents should spank their children, and no one should be snowflakes, and we need a tough leader that's really going to make things great again. And he's trying to, like, stir up the population with these newspaper articles. Meanwhile, back in Transylvania, the actor and his young boyfriend are going up the mountain with their very, very sexy, obviously a vampire guide. She takes them to a camp of, like, Romani people, and she gets them to, like, change their clothes, so now they're dressed, like, in the local fashion, and they go up the hill and they're hiking up the mountains, and this very overweight, out of shape, elderly retired actor is just like, I can't walk in the woods anymore, but I'm so in love with this guy that I'm gonna follow him to the ends of the earth. And you're like, is he a vampire? Why is he so in love with him? No, he's not. Turns out that she is, like she obviously was. She gets naked a lot. He keeps waking up in the middle of the night and seeing her do naked, like, creepy vampire stuff, because of course the hot vampire chick just has to be naked all the time. It's because she keeps transforming into a bat, and then when she turns back she doesn't have any clothes, but it's like, oh, so convenient that it's the hot chick that does that. So they get up to Dracula's castle. He's like, oh no, she tricked us. She's here to turn us into vampires or something. Oh, he blacks out. He remembers drinking from a chalice of, like, making him drink the vile blood, and he wakes up. Meanwhile, he's writing this all down in his diary, right? Like, he finds the energy to write it all down in his diary. He wakes up in the middle of the night and he's next to his boyfriend. His boyfriend has had his eye torn out and he's, like, screaming on the bed in agony. And the next thing he knows, he wakes up in a hospital miles away. Because it turns out there was a scientist, a naturalist in the woods searching for bats. He's obviously searching for vampires as they turn into bats. And this guy goes and he catches the vampire lady, whose name is Elena. He catches her in her bat form and he captures her, and he's like, I have caught the rare species of bat. And he rescues the two guys. He takes them to the hospital. And this naturalist is going to bring this bat back to back to England from Transylvania. And you think he's kind of like part of the plan and he might be kind of evil, but no, he's just kind of there. And like the vampires were going to go to England anyway, so I don't know why he needed to be the one to capture her and bring her there, because I don't know. It makes it seem like it's his fault capturing this bat and bringing her to England, and that's why vampire lady ends up in England and starts turning people into vampires. Because of course as soon as she gets there, she escapes and she kills him, and then she just starts wreaking havoc. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So Maurice wakes up in the hospital and his boyfriend's there and he's missing his eye. But his boyfriend's like, no, I feel great now. Yeah, sucks about the eye, but I didn't need to be hot anyway because now I have a purpose. Now I know what I'm going to do with my life. I'm going to go back and claim my place as the head of this Illuminati society, and we're going to take over England. And that's what I'm going to do because, I happen to be on this Illuminati society and that's what I want to do with my life now. And now I have a purpose. And he's like, but you're going to come with me, right? Because you're still my boyfriend. And he's like so in love with him that he's like, yeah, I'll come. But yeah. So meanwhile, back with the Harkers, Quincy is being really weird at home. He keeps like staring at the pretty nurse girl, and she keeps getting really uncomfortable. And she's like, yeah, I know he's 12 and he's just hit puberty, and yeah, I know I'm pretty and men stare at me all the time, but it's really awkward and uncomfortable, and I really don't like it because he's kind of looking at me like he wants to eat me, not just like, boy stuff, but like creepy vampire stuff. And so Quincy has like red glints in his eyes. So he knows there's something going on with Quincy. Sometimes he talks in weird prophecies. Sometimes he's normal. They try sending him back to school, and he writes a really creepy essay on the right of the Strigoi. And his teachers are like, oh, why is this kid so weird? He was supposed to write an essay on something normal, like on baptism, but he wrote it on the rights of the Strigoi. So yeah, we know something's up with Quincy. And he keeps talking about there being two parts of him, or two sides of him, and something warring within him. And also of having two fathers. So, the obvious implication is that Dracula has been part of him all along, that something about him was spawned by Dracula in his birth, which you're like, well, he was born a year after Dracula died, so how is that possible? I'll tell you, we find out at the end, but I'll tell you now. It turns out that Dracula did something to Mina that was in her, that when she birthed Quincy, it got passed on to him. I don't know why he couldn't have just put it into her and kept it in her. But no, it got passed on to Quincy, and now Quincy has this part of Dracula's soul in him. He's like a Horcrux, right? He's, they call him the Vessel. And, Dracula is like, from beyond the grave, grooming him. Excuse me. And, Sarah Ann, the nurse, is noticing something's weird. Mina is kind of jealous because she can tell that Jonathan has the hots for Sarah. Everyone has the hots for Sarah. Sarah just wants to be home with her boyfriend. Meanwhile, Dr. Seward, back home, gets a call from his old insane asylum saying like, hey, this old insane asylum is haunted by the ghost of Renfield. And we don't really believe in ghosts because we're all scientists. Yet it's obviously haunted by the ghost of Renfield. You want to come here and help us out? And so Seward's like, fascinating. So he goes. And he like notices that when he gets to the insane asylum, that unlike in Dracula, where we have the very classic madhouse scene of Gothic literature where the madmen are, very loud and very in your face, now they're all drugged because now they're using science, and they keep all the inmates drugged and just sitting there in a state of drug stupor all the time. And Seward is like, I can see why you would do this, but it's very disturbing, and I am so glad I don't work here anymore and that I got out of this field of medical science. So they go to Renfield's old cell in the insane asylum, and they're like, well, we were renovating his cell, which is obviously haunted. We found his secret diary hidden in the wall. Will you please take it away, because it gives us all the creeps? So Seward's like, okay, I'll take the secret diary away. So he takes it back home and he starts trying to read it, but it's written in a secret code. So he's trying to decipher this secret code, and he gets really obsessed with it, like going down the rabbit hole obsessed. And he starts figuring out, well, it turns out that the cop who asked for the vacation to go back to his dying wife was an old friend of Renfield's, because Renfield used to be a policeman. And nobody knew that. Surprise. Renfield used to be a policeman, and he worked on the police force, and he was partners with this cop. And so Seward is like, I have to find this cop. So he goes to Scotland Yard to try to find the cop. And they're like, he just took a vacation to go back to his wife's deathbed. So Seward tries to follow him, and he just kind of disappears off the map. Nobody knows where he went. He disappears for weeks and weeks and weeks. We find out later that he just kind of went out of his mind for a while with his obsession over this diary, just so he would be taken off the board of the players of Dracula's chess game. And so he just kind of wanders in the woods for weeks, deciphering this diary, until he eventually gets to the town where the old cop went, Renfield's old partner. It's very, it doesn't really end up kind of going anywhere. It's just something to just sort of make things mysterious and weird. Meanwhile, the newspaper stuff is going on. Parliament's getting, like, stirred up. There's been a lot of unrest in the streets, and the cops are like, why are all the gang members being weird all of a sudden? They used to kind of have like a truce, the three main gangs in town. Now they're all like at each other's throats, and they're trying to ask the people, like the boyfriend they arrested, like, what's going on with the gangs? He's like, I don't know, man, we're just all having weird dreams and we're all on edge, and it's like there's voices talking to us, like making us all just be angry all the time. So what the Tanglemere faction of the Illuminati wants to do is use this unrest to make the police look incompetent, and therefore do a seize of power, because then they can declare martial law and kind of take over England for themselves. Meanwhile, the Englishman who now has one eye, the one-eyed man, and his boyfriend come back to town, and he's like, I'm going to take control. They're like setting bombs off all over the city and just causing chaos. So finally Van Helsing dies. And at his funeral, he has two funerals, but at the second funeral, they try to plant a bomb at the funeral, because that way they would not only destroy Van Helsing's, death, but they would kill Mina and Jonathan and Arthur Holmwood and his new wife Carrie, who was pregnant and then had a miscarriage because she started going crazy because she just started like losing her mind and sleepwalking and talking. It was very much like Lucy, except Mina was like, is she being preyed on by a vampire? But she wasn't. She just thought she was. Really, she was just like formerly mentally ill and was having a relapse. Anyway, she has a miscarriage. It's very sad. And now she's at this funeral on a lot of drugs to try to like not embarrass anyone while she's there. And Jonathan and Mina and Quincy and everyone's at this funeral. And there's a bomb. And we know there's a bomb because Sarah Ann, who has since been captured by the vampires after Van Helsing died, she went back to the city, got captured by the vampires, and they're making her do their dirty work now. She planted the bomb, and Caroline notices it because she's attuned to that, because she is mentally ill, so therefore she can psychically tell there's a bomb. So she goes and she grabs a bomb and she runs out of the church with it and explodes just her in the middle of a field instead of exploding the whole church. And it's very sad, because not only did this poor woman like lose control over her faculties, she lost her baby, and then she just like martyred herself. So Arthur Holmwood is very upset, and he's like, I don't want to stay in England anymore. Everything is horrible. I don't like the way the country's going. Everyone's trying to like make Britain great again, and I'm trying to be progressive over here, and I just can't take it. I'm going on vacation. So he tries to leave town. So he's gone. Jack Seward's off rambling in the woods out of his mind. Jonathan is like just getting drunker and drunker and drunker. Quincy is getting weirder, and Mina is like, does nobody see that obviously Dracula's coming back? He did vow revenge. Yes, I know we all saw him die, but we don't know how it works. I think he's coming back, because Mina's smart, right? And of course no one believes her. Jonathan doesn't want to believe her. She's like, if you guys aren't going to help me, I'm going to figure it out on my own. She can't really do anything because, she's a woman. Not only is she just a woman, she's a married woman. She's a mom now. What could she even do? Right, is there any Dracula in this Dracula novel? No, we keep being told Dracula's coming. Dracula's coming. So the Illuminati has taken over England with martial law, and they are going to perform this ritual that will bring Dracula back. And we know that Maurice, the old actor, is being kept bedridden by his boyfriend, who keeps feeding him this like viscous, horrible liquid, obviously blood, but he's just like, this medicine is so gross. I don't know why he keeps giving it to me, but he's being prepared to be the other vessel, I guess, the vessel to bring Dracula back from the dead somehow. And there's one point where Sarah Ann comes in and tries to help him escape, and they almost escape, and then they get caught and they take back, and that's when she gets turned into a vampire, and so now she is an evil vampire, because as soon as you get turned into a vampire in this, you just automatically turn evil. You're like, I love being a vampire. I don't know why I wasn't wearing this red hat all along. This red pill tastes great. It's like, it's immediately, you switch over to the ideology of the vampires as soon as you become a vampire. So they send Sarah Ann to the Harkers to try to attack them the same night that they're going to do this ritual to try to bring Dracula back. So there's a few things going on at the same time here. And meanwhile, also, Arthur is trying to, like, sail off into the sunset. And the cops... the Scotland Yard has been blown up because all along the commissioner, whose diary entries we're getting for the cops, started getting seduced by the sexy naked vampire Elena. Like, she came into his office one day and she's like, I am naked, be in love with me. And he's like, yes ma'am. And like, this tough as nails commissioner immediately gets seduced by this vampire and just starts doing all her bidding. And she's like, I want you to be a very bad policeman and just do no crime solving work. And he's like, yes ma'am. And so all of his diary entries are like, she's so sexy, I can't help it, I just have to do everything she tells me. And it ends with him blowing up Scotland Yard and himself in the process. So now the police are in shambles, and the American cop, who's the only one left at this point, is he gets fired because they're like, you're not patriotic enough. Go back to America. Go back to your country. We only want Englishmen here. And so they bring Maurice down. Well, okay, so first the vampires attack the Harkers. And Mina and Quincy get kidnapped, and Jonathan gets house trapped by Sarah Ann. So Jonathan is trapped in the house with Sarah Ann, who's now a vampire, and he kind of had the hots for her before, so now it's very sexy. It's kind of like the beginning of the original Dracula, where Jonathan's trapped by the 3 vampire brides, and she's just feeding on him all the time, and it's like, oh no, it's so painful, yet so erotic at the same time. But it's the way it's written at this point is just sort of like implied that it's supposed to be. And it was around this point that the novel started falling apart for me, because I was really on board. I was like, I love the way it's written. The writing is so, pastiche and great. But now things just started really unraveling and getting really, really silly. And the writing could not make up for it. So Jonathan's trapped by Sarah Ann. Mina is kidnapped and taken to the Illuminati guys. And they're like, we're going to perform the ritual to bring Dracula back. And they bring out Maurice, the old actor who's been, fattened with the blood for this ritual, and he's there with his blind, one-eyed boyfriend who's taken over the House of Lords, and they're all ready to do this ritual, which involves Maurice puking up a whole bunch of blood. And at this point, Maurice is like, my fate is sealed, I'm going to die, I did it for love, there's nothing I can do to stop it, I might as well just give in, it's my destiny. So he pukes up all this blood, thinking he's gonna die, and then he doesn't. That was his only job, was to puke up the blood. And now he's like, fine. And he's like, a second chance. So something's going to happen there. So this blood like falls onto the floor. And then it kind of rises up like spawn. And it's just kind of like this sentient blob. And then it jumps onto the boyfriend, the one-eyed man, and kind of blobs over him and into him. And then he turns into Dracula. So it's not that this blob of blood, which was essentially Dracula, like goes inside him and then he takes over this guy's body. No, he like physically transforms, and now he's Dracula as described in the book, like tall, big forehead, big nose, giant mustache, classic Stoker Dracula. So the one-eyed boyfriend is gone, kill your gays, out of the question. But Maurice is still alive. And he's like, I don't know why I'm still alive. Excuse me. Need more to drink. So, and Mina's just sitting there like screaming and like, where's my son? What have you done? I'll never let you get away with this. And then Dracula's just like, having you is part of my revenge. And the last thing we know is that she screams. And somehow she wrote this diary entry. And then we never hear from her again, right? So, yeah, finally Dracula shows up. That's the end of part 2. So, like, we are like this far into the book at this point when Dracula finally shows up. Like, there's not that much left. Maybe around there. And then things just start snowballing really fast. So meanwhile, while this is going on, Quincy, the little boy, shows up on the boat of Arthur Holmwood's boat and is like, we're turning this boat around. We're going back to England. We've got work to do for Dracula. And they're like, how the heck did you get on this boat? And he's like, I don't know. It's never explained. We don't find out how he got on the boat. Maybe the vampire woman flew him out there as a bat and dropped him off. But he seems to be surprised when he meets her later. So I don't know. So the boat's heading back to England now. They're bringing Arthur back because for some reason it's important that he be there for this. I don't know why. That's never explained. It's like, we had to scatter the pieces off the chessboard, but now we got to bring them back. Meanwhile, Jack Seward's finally gotten to the town where the old partner of Renfield went. And apparently the old partner of Renfield, when he went there, he was already turned into a vampire. So once he got there, he started spreading vampirism around the whole town. And this town is now a town full of vampires. And Jack Seward gets there and he meets the guy's daughter, who is the one that wrote the letter that says, like, Dad, come home, Mom's dying. And she's like the local vampire huntress now. And she's like, join my crew. We're going to kill all the vampires. So they like make their own little vampire hunting crew. Her name is Ruby. This is literally all we know about her. And then the American cop also shows up out there. And yeah, it's like and Jonathan Harker, meanwhile, has escaped from Sarah Ann because she got trapped by sunlight accidentally one day, and he uses that and he escapes and he kills her, he chops off her head, and he runs away and he gets to this town too. So they all like sort of catch up to each other. There's another part that I skipped. There's a lot going on in this story. I'm like leaving out big chunks too. So they get there, and around this time the ship has like made its way back and it like crash lands, and the only 3 survivors on this ship are Quincy, Arthur, and Arthur's servant. His name is Strickland. Oh, the other plot line was that when Mina was trying to help Carrie back before she had her miscarriage because she was going crazy, she had gone out to the Holmwoods estate and she met their butler. And the butler was trying to help track down Jack Seward. And the butler was this really cool guy. His name was Armory, and he was like really helpful, and he was trying to help Mina. He was the only one who believed in her. But he got turned into a vampire. So when he came back to their house, that was when the vampires attacked. So Armory is out there, being a jerk too. He's the one that betrayed Mina. My extemporaneous recaps of books. This is a big book. There's a lot to recap, right? All right. So now we've got Mina is Dracula's prisoner, but we don't know what's going on. The only point of view we have with Dracula now is Maurice, who now becomes Dracula's like new Renfield. He's still human. Dracula is turning everyone around him into vampires. He turns the newspaper guys into vampires. He turns the other cops into the vampires, and he's got all the gang members from all the warring gangs trapped in the Tower of London as his feeding supply, which I'm like, it's kind of nice of him that he's only feeding off criminals, and they make a point that he's feeding only off criminals. But there is someone thinking that was like, what's he going to do when he runs out of criminals? Who's he going to eat then? Good question. And they're making Britain great again, and we read all these news articles about how, like, law and order is back in Britain. Men are being men again, and, people are returning to the old values, a feudal system. But they also announced that the nice British gentleman who was in charge of this, is now mysteriously disappeared because there was an earthquake, because of course there was. And he died in the earthquake. And now the new leader of this faction is the Count. And they're like, Count who? We don't know, but the faction says he's okay, so we say he's okay. And everyone's like, wait a minute. I thought we were being patriotic. He's foreign and European. He's not British. Why is he in charge? They're like, shh, 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 shh. It's okay. He has Britain's best interests in mind. Trust me, he's going to make Britain great again. He's exactly the sort of man that you want leading this people. So they roll with it. And we know that Dracula is trying to get the kid back because Dracula is very strong and he's taken over Britain, but he's not full yet. He's not complete. He's missing his last Horcrux, right? Like there's something in the kid that he needs, that last piece of his soul that he needs to be restored with through the rite of the Strigoi, which the kid happened to write a essay on earlier in the book. How convenient. So he needs to get the kid back. So all of this has been like an elaborate chess game plan to get this kid back to him. So I was like, wait, so you sent the people away and now you're bringing them back again? Why didn't you? So Jonathan Harker, Jack Seward, Arthur Holmwood, and our three new characters, which are the American cop, Ruby, the vampire hunter lady, and the Arthur's servant, and the kid, are now the new like band of heroes. And they're like, first they gotta clear the vampires out of this town, so there's like a very quick montage of them clearing this town out. Then they gotta get back to London in time to attack Dracula. They want to do it during the day, so they get a plan. They amass a bunch of weapons, have a training montage, and then they go back. They're going back to London, but because it's chaos in the streets, basically it's like a zombie takeover at this point, because everyone is turned into vampires and they don't know who to trust. It takes them, they can't take the trains, they have to go on foot. It's hard. Oh, there's one scene where Jonathan is trying to get to where the other guys are before he gets there. That he's like lost in the woods, he keeps running into vampires, he's hiding, and he falls asleep. And these two kids find him. Well, they're like 20. These two young people find him, his brother and sister, and they're like, come to our house, let us help you. And he's like, you're obviously vampires, you're gonna kill me. And they're like, no, we're not. Look, see our teeth? We're normal. We're like normal humans. He's like, wow, you really are normal humans. Thank you. I will come to your house. So he goes to their house in the middle of the woods. It's very like Hansel and Gretel, like the witch in the woods kind of situation. He's like, this is pretty creepy, but they're not vampires, so I guess it's okay. And they're like, eat the soup. And he's like, okay, you said that in a really creepy way. Why are you talking like that? Eat the soup. And he's like, I'm not going to eat that soup. And they're like, fine, let's just kill him. It turns out, he's like, but why? You're not vampires. Why do you want to kill me? They're like, because we're creepy murder twins and we just like murdering people. And it used to be really hard for us to get away with it, even though we live in a creepy murder house in the woods. But now that Dracula's risen to power and made America great again, he's enabled our racism, and now we can just do whatever we want and get away with it. And it's so much better living in this lifestyle now that we can just kill people when we want, because, someone who supports our ways is in power, and he's empowered us. And Jonathan's just like, fuck that, and he kills them, and then he runs away. Yeah, that was a very poignant scene. So back to the heroes are coming back to London, and they decide they're going to stop in a church and pray before they finish going back to London. So they're like, let's all go into this church and pray. And Quincy's like, yeah, I'm not going into that church and praying. And they all go in except for him and Jack Seward, and Jack's like, why not? And he's like, yeah, I'm just not going to go into that church and pray. And he's like, is it because you're Dracula? And he's like, no, he doesn't even suspect. He's just like, okay, I guess we'll see you after we're done praying. And of course, Quincy gets kidnapped while he's not in the church praying. So they all come running out of the church when they hear the screaming. And he's getting kidnapped by the sexy naked vampire lady who's always turning into a bat. And she flies off into the sky with him, and they're like, oh man, if only we hadn't said it was okay for him not to come into the church with us. So he gets kidnapped and he goes, and they're like, oh no, they're going to perform the Rite of Strigoi right before dawn. We have to get to London right before dawn before it's too late. So now we got a ticking clock. So now they're racing to London, which they were going there anyway. They were trying to get there after dawn. Now they're trying to get there before dawn. Before the Rite of Strigoi can be performed. And as they're going, right before they leave, right before Quincy leaves, the American policeman tries to stop him. And he's like, don't try to stop me or you regret it. And he's like, no, man, I really got to try to stop you. We're here to save you. So Quincy shoots him because they had the weapons gathering montage. And Quincy's like, I'm really sorry about this, man. So he shoots him. So the American policeman falls, and meanwhile the other, the servant guy had already gotten killed off in an earlier vampire attack. So now we're down to just Arthur Homewood, Jonathan Harker, Jack Seward, and Ruby. But Ruby wants to stay behind with the American policeman, even though she's the main vampire hunter in this group, because they've fallen in love, and she has to make sure he's okay. So now we're down to just the three OG guys from the original book, running after Quincy to try to save him. And there's a scene where they run into a guy with a car, and they're like, hey man, let us borrow your car. The fate of the country's in the line. My son has been kidnapped. We have to stop the vampires. And the guy is not a vampire, but he's like, no, I like the direction the country's going. I think it's good And I like the changes this government is making. And, you know, I do want to make Britain great again. So, no, I won't let you borrow my car to go stop the evil vampires, of which I'm well aware. I'm not just talking politics here. I'm really on board with the vampires. And they're like, fuck that. And they punch him and they steal his car. But it was just another scene, kind of like those Cabin in the Woods people, of just like the regular British people falling for this like dramatic government shift. You know, metaphors are very thick. So, which, you know, these are not bad metaphors to make for a book that came out in 2020 that was obviously being written after the 2016 election. Like, I can see what they were going for here politics-wise with Brexit and, you know, the stuff going on in America and like everything. I can see it. It was just handled in a very cheesy way. And like, the way I'm talking about it now sounds kind of chaotic. It was that chaotic in the book. Like, the first 2/3 of the book are very slowly paced, very elaborately drawn out, very Victorian, very like of that feeling. And then the last like third of the book is just like Scooby-Doo hallway running scene hijinks. So, meanwhile, back in London, Maurice, the old actor who's the only human left by now at this point, is told by his vampire overlords that he will have to prepare the boy in some way for this ritual. They don't say what he has to do to prepare the boy, but they say that it's something someone of his inclinations would be apt to do. So it's implied that he has to rape the boy, basically. And Maurice is just like so horrified by this. He's like, I may be old and queer, but I am no child rapist. You know, I may have been serving vampires, but I draw the line there, sir. And he doesn't know what to do because he was the person that had accepted his fate. He's like, you know, if you can't beat him, join him. I'm really not on board with this horrible, awful government, but at least I'm still alive. So he finally reaches his limit. He really doesn't want to do it, but he's not sure how he's going to get out of it because he's just a weakling human. The vampire's here. So Quincy shows up and Maurice is like, I'm supposed to prepare you. And Quincy's like, I know, I understand. And I want to meet my fate because I accept that Dracula is my true father and my two sides, but I also have a secret plan. Because apparently Quincy has been like playing 60 chess above everyone else this whole time, and he has his own secret plan. So he tells Maurice, instead of preparing him, to go release all the prisoners. So Maurice goes and he releases all the gang members that have been like kept in the Tower of London. So then there's havoc in the streets, chaos, gang members running around like crazy. And when Jonathan and Jack and Arthur show up, but just before they show up, they ran into another one of our characters, the newspaper guy who'd been writing all the articles that was like fanning the public flames, like basically, you know, I think he's supposed to represent like Facebook or something, the people that enabled the harmful media coverage that made people think it was okay to elect Trump. I mean, Brexit, I mean, whatever. He's been turned into a vampire too, and he attacks them and he bites Seward and rips his throat out. So Seward is like bleeding to death at this point, but they kill him, they off him, they cut off his head. So now Seward's out of the game too. He can't help. So we're down to just Arthur Holmwood and Jonathan Harker. They're the only two left. They leave Seward in the car, and then the car gets stolen by a bunch of gang members, and they're like, bye, we left our friend in there, please help him live. So they rush into the Tower of London, and we know at this point that he's kind of weak. He really needs something to make him stronger. He keeps having these scenes where he turns into mist and like then jumps on someone and eats them. He does a lot of turning into mist. We don't really see him turn into a bat or anything. He's adopted a wolf that escaped from the zoo. He has a pet wolf. It's implied that Mina is with him and he's made her a vampire, but we never see her. We never do anything. It's only the other vampire, Elena, who's around. So they get to the Tower of London, final boss fight time, right? It's Arthur Holmwood versus Elena. He's fighting her with the stakes and the holy water and everything, and they're having their final boss fight, and Jonathan Harker runs past, you know. Meanwhile, they've all written diary entries about all of this, right? Like, they have found time to write in their diaries during all this. He goes running down the stairs. He goes down into the crypt, and he gets there just in time to see Dracula and Quincy And he's like, Dracula's feeding from Quincy, right? He's drinking from his son. And Jonathan Harker's like, get off my son. And Dracula's like, actually, he's my son. Sorry, Quincy, you have two dads. And Quincy's like, I have always known this, because he's a weird, creepy demon child. And he's like, no, father, Dracula is my true father. There's always been something of Dracula in me that he passed to mother and then passed to me. Though why he couldn't just keep it in Mina, I don't know why it had to go to Quincy. And Dracula's like, yes, we are going to perform the rite of the Strigoi. Now I will take my Horcrux from him, and then I will become complete again, because I'm kind of old and frail. And Quincy's like, but joke's on you, other dad. I didn't get prepared. And he's like, what? And he's like, no, Maurice betrayed you. And he went off and he set the inmates free, and I am not prepared. And Dracula's like, we can still do the rite. We can still do it. And Quincy's like, no. And Dracula says, there's no one stronger than me that can defeat me. You have no other father. And Quincy's like, wrong. I have one more father. Father in heaven. I'm apparently really religious and have been doing a lot of praying, and religion has been important all along, even though this book didn't really imply that in any way whatsoever, and my father in heaven is the ultimate father, and he will defeat you. And Dracula's like, no. And Jonathan's like, yes, go kid. I knew you had it in you. So, then what happens is that, because we knew Quincy was the vessel, he thought he was the vessel carrying the part of Dracula that needed to be restored to him. He's like, no, I'm the vessel that will contain you, and I'm just going to, like, put you inside me. And he's like, but how? So Dracula turns into mist, and then Quincy, like, Kirby's him up, just, like, sucks all the mist into him, and Dracula goes inside of him and stays there, and now he's in Quincy, and Quincy's fine. And Jonathan's like, good job, son. And Quincy's like, thanks, Dad. Problem solved. And then the other coffin opens up and Mina comes out and she's like, hi, boys, I'm a vampire. The end. But there's an epilogue. So now they have a vampire mom. So what we find out what they do after Dracula's defeated by Quincy sucking him up like Kirby is they have to go around all of England and slay all the vampires that got made. And there was a lot, like serious zombie outbreak levels that they're slaying, and they just have to destroy all the vampires. They're chopping off heads. Everyone who's become a vampire is just automatically evil, and so just automatically needs to get killed. You can't, like, reason with them. You can't convince them to come back to your side of the political spectrum. You just have to kill them, apparently. The American guy survived, even though he got shot. He's in a wheelchair now. He and Ruby, the vampire huntress, who we never even really got to meet, are now in love, and they're going to get married. Jack Seward has met a new girlfriend. We don't get to meet her, but apparently he finds someone. He survives too. Yeah, he's horribly disfigured, but he's back to being a psychiatrist. And he's doing good. At the very last scene, we are at Quincy's now 13th birthday. And he's turning 13. He's having another birthday party. Everyone's there. Arthur is there. And Arthur has come back and he's like, I'm sorry I ran away from my country when she needed me most. Now I'm going to take control of Parliament. I will be in charge of Parliament. Oh, it was also implied that the king was getting seduced. King Edward was getting seduced by the vampire Elena, and that he was just as bad as the police commissioner was like, yes, vampire boobs. I'll do anything you want. But apparently he's okay now. So they're taking the country back. Country is slowly being healed. Dracula's vapors are inside of Quincy, but he's fine. He goes back to school and everyone's fine. And at this birthday party, they're just having a nice happy birthday party. Then at the very end of the birthday party, they bring their vampire mom up from where they keep her locked in the basement, and she gets to like sit with them at the dinner table for 5 minutes and drink Jonathan's blood in front of everyone. But unlike all the other vampires they had to kill, she's apparently okay to save. They could just keep her around as long as they keep her locked in the basement. So poor Mina is just like a creepy vampire now. And at the very end of the book, we find out that Quincy has put all these diary entries and letters together for this compilation he's created, because it's now been 10 years. Now he's all grown up and he's joined the army. World War I is happening. And he's like, I feel something going on inside of me with that Dracula vapor fog that I inhaled 10 years ago, and I don't know what's going to happen. There's a big war coming to Europe right now. World War I is happening, so I'm afraid something might go down. He might be coming back. This is my warning to you all. Sorry, I did my best. The end. Yeah, it was very Shaun of the Dead the way Mina came out at the end. And I was like, oh man, you guys did Mina dirty. Like, I like Mina being a vampire. I think that's cool. You see that in a lot of versions of Dracula. Mina actually gets turned into a vampire. But the way vampires were in this was that they were just completely lost their mind, like zombies, completely converted, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. They have no souls. So Mina can't still be Mina in this version unless she's like the one random exception to vampirism. Meanwhile, they're going around killing all the other vampires, children, old people, everyone. No one's redeemable. They're just like zombies slaying all the vampires in the whole country. But Mina gets to live. One thing that someone in our book club Discord mentioned was that one of the many disappointing things about this book was the way it didn't handle a lot of the themes in Dracula. Like, the unintentional homoeroticism in Dracula never got addressed. You never saw Dracula be sexy or vampire-y with Jonathan the way he was in the book. We had this sexy vampire lady being very gratuitously sexual. Dracula wasn't erotic at all. He was just lethal and scary. The xenophobia just got swept under the rug. Like, I could see the metaphors that the author was going with the whole, like, you know, current political situation, the way the country will just sort of follow a demagogue and, you know, be awful to your fellow man because someone in power says it's okay, so yay, we have an excuse to get away with it. But usually it's someone, like, there's a patriotism to it. So for Dracula to be the alien coming to the country and, you know, the original fear of the vampire was a xenophobic fear, that kind of got completely misused in this book. And, you know, they mentioned it's like, why are we all following a foreigner in this? I don't know. Shh. It's fine. He's a patriot. It's fine. You know, which doesn't really apply to any of the things that it was trying to metaphorically represent with what's going on in the current political climate, or at least the political climate of like 3 or 4 years ago when this book was written. You know, it came out in 2020, so it was probably written in like 2018, right? So that was like prime Trump years, prime Brexit. So yeah, I get what it was trying to do, but like I said, the first half of the book had so much promise, and it was kind of slow and maybe a little like, what's the point? When are we going to get to the point? But you expect that in something that's a Victorian pastiche, so I was okay with it. I was on board, but then when we actually got to the point, it just got so like cheesy and slapstick almost, and like the vampires were just like so shallow, and the way it just kind of turned into a Scooby-Doo episode with people running around in this zany way, I'm just, oh, what a letdown. Like, at the beginning, I was just like, wow, this book is amazing. Look at all the big words they're using. I don't know that many big words. So Victorian. And then, yeah. Weird book. And the fact that it's Dracula's child and the kid is barely even in it. And when he is in it, he's just like this elf child who's not even have a character arc. And there's this one point where they're talking to the psychiatrist and they're like, why do you think Dracula is the way he is? Let's psychoanalyze Dracula's motivation. And the psychiatrist is just like, oh, I think he's lonely. And I think he just wants to make more people like him so he's not alone. But I'm still going to cut his head off. Yeah, I'm still going to cut his head off. And it just kind of like shoots itself in the foot for its own psychoanalysis. Of like, you can't even get into what goes into the mind of a demagogue or like a narcissistic leader or anything. And just makes everything really, really shallow. Okay, I think I've reached the end of summarizing this book and analyzing it briefly. I'm going to try to scroll up in the chat and see what you guys have said. If you said something earlier that I didn't notice, please feel free to say it again so I can read it again. They need 2 more acts, outline 1 more, and panicked. I mean, if this book was longer, like if you'd taken the last part of this book and fleshed it out and made it much bigger, it probably would have been better, but I don't know that I would have been able to handle this because this was a lot of book to start with. Like, I think the whole thing needed to be condensed and like rejuged. I don't think just making it longer would have made anyone happy. Oh, thank you, Victoria Stark, for the $5 Canadian. The women in the novel really got the shaft. Plus, I feel like Sarah Ann could have been replaced by Ruby as a vampire hunter and nothing would have been lost. Yes, exactly. You could have combined those two characters and it would have been fine. I mean, I like that some of the characters ended up having tragic endings. Like, I was hoping Sarah Ann would make it, and then she didn't. That's tragic. It's kind of like Lucy in the original Caroline. I was hoping she'd make it. She didn't. I was hoping the newspaper guy, not the really awful newspaper guy, but the other one, I hoped he'd be okay. I hope, like, the cop guy would be okay, but, you know, they didn't make it. But Ruby was just pointless. Like, she was set up like this author had this idea for this badass vampire hunter lady whose dad was a cop, and he comes back and she's been like, I've been keeping this town clear of vampires for all these years. Like, she's gonna have her own episode or something, and then she's just like off to the side. Like, this character got sidelined. It also just assumed that Stoker's Dracula is Vlad the Impaler. It did kind of do that at the beginning. You got some of that, but then it kind of let that go as well. So I'm glad it didn't go all in on that, because Stoker's Dracula is not Vlad the Impaler at all. He is never supposed to be. He's just supposed to be someone similar to Vlad the Impaler, but he's not supposed to be that actual historical person. Yeah. I'm glad this didn't go further into that than it did. Hey, they ate Dracula. You know how many people Dracula's eaten? It was his turn to get eaten. His turn. The idea of Renfield having a secret diary is really cool, but it sounds like it didn't go anywhere. You are absolutely right. It went absolutely nowhere. And we find out that Seward's theory later is that it was all just a ploy, a trap to get him to leave town. That's it. Like, could Dracula have planned that far ahead for like 12 years ago to have had Renfield randomly write a secret diary to plant to hide in the wall to make Seward leave town randomly 12 years later? And they're like, he doesn't think like a human. He thinks in far scope because he is a vampire. And they're like, no, that's just stupid. It's just dumb. Like, you could have got Seward to leave town some other way. I wanted the diary to have been meaningful, or I wanted there to have been a clue in the diary of Renfield's that would have helped Seward maybe figure out how to stop Dracula. Maybe Renfield talks about the Rite of Strigoi, and that's how they find out about it, because they never learned what the Rite of Strigoi was. It was just this essay the kid wrote, but none of his like family actually read that essay. We didn't even get to read that essay. We just know he wrote an essay called that. We didn't actually find out what the rite involved. We don't know how he needed to be prepared. We don't know anything about it. The last good scene was Sarah Ann trying to help Maurice escape. That was a good scene. And I liked Maurice. I really like Maurice. I like that he wasn't a glamorous character, but he was a sympathetic character. You know, he was like fat and he was sloppy, but he was like also kind of sophisticated at the same time, but he wasn't like a laughingstock. He wasn't like gross, but he wasn't perfect, you know, at all. And he was just like a complex gay man who had like his ups and his downs, and he wasn't vilified, but he had this arc of being like, should I just accept my fate and just be resigned to it, the things I do for love, or should I fight and maybe try to do the right thing? Is doing the right thing worth it? I don't know. Can one man fight the system, or should I just lay down and die? And this, I feel like that's a very real struggle a lot of people have in political times like this, is like, what can I as one man do in a system that is so corrupt and horrible? Maybe there is something. He came through in the end, and he then went to jail. Like, he didn't get to be a free man after that. He went to jail. But he still felt like, you know, he had a satisfying end, and he thought he was going to die, and then he didn't, and now he's living on and living with the consequences of his life. And he talks about how he lived this life of sin, right, for being gay, or maybe just not for being gay, but for the way he like went to whorehouses and that kind of stuff, and dealt with sex workers. But that's not what's bad about him. That's not what's wrong. What's wrong was his complacency and the way he enabled the system, or maybe ran away from the system instead of trying to change the system. But the way that you might deal with such a hugely oppressive political climate as one person, and how you handle that. So if this book did one thing right, I would say it was Maurice. I did not like the way it dealt with Mina, Jonathan, Seward. Homewood. Van Helsing? Poor Van Helsing. He got the shaft. He got killed off. I kept waiting for there to be a reveal about his death. Like, did Dracula kill him somehow? Did one of the vampires kill him somehow? Was there like some layer to his death? No, he just had a stroke and died. And they're like, yes, finally Van Helsing is dead. That means it's time for Dracula to return, because he couldn't do it before Van Helsing died. But as soon as Van Helsing died, he could do it. And I'm like, what would Van Helsing do? All Van Helsing did in the original book was know stuff. Now everyone knows that same stuff, so it's not like he stood in the way or anything. No, they never explained the right. A lot of the reading this is picking up threads and waiting and hoping for them to be capitalized on, and then didn't. Yes, very true. Because it did make it seem like Van Helsing had magic powers. He did not. Kind of weird that this feels more sexist than the novel written in the 19th century. Yeah, kind of weird, huh? Kind of weird. The police commissioner's final entry, I have this bomb. I know this is wrong. I should tell someone, but I'll just send out this journal instead. What? The entries were just hilarious. Yes, they were, but the idea was that the police commissioner was under the vampire mind control, and he fully was aware he was under vampire mind control. He's like, I am trying to tell with words to someone what's going on, and I physically can't because of the vampire mind control. I think the vampires are way too overpowered in this. Anytime the vampires wanted to accomplish something, they just magically could. There was no like fantasy rules explanation for what their powers were or why they could do their certain powers. They just, whenever they needed to have a power, they had it. And I thought that was way too easy for them. But then they were killed really easily too. Like, the only thing you had to know to kill a vampire was that crosses hurt them, and you just have to like stake them and chop off their heads. Most people don't know this, which is why most people get killed by vampires. But the people who did know this could kill the vampires very easily, so I guess it's a little give and take. Alright, I'm gonna scroll up in the chat, see what else I missed. You guys are saying some good stuff today. I'm glad that we're all kind of like thinking about this book, right? Like, this book gave us a lot to think about. I would not say this is a bad book. I would say I personally am disappointed by the second half of this book. That's what I would say. I admire what this book was trying to do. I admire that it was going for a very modern political metaphor. I appreciate that. I just think it was handled in kind of a sloppy way. I feel like this is the kind of book that if it was turned into a TV show by a team of writers who cared and were willing to do a good job of finessing the metaphors and the messages and really like showing them in a thought out, balanced way over a series of episodes, you could do a lot with the ideas in this book. Like, this book is a good starting point. I feel like this one author either didn't have the ability or the resources to achieve what he was kind of trying to hope to achieve. Admire him for trying, though, because, you know, good for him. Political metaphor is something Stoker would have approved of. Yes, I believe he would. I believe Stoker would have been like, yes. It was very similar to Anno Dracula. As I said before, this feels like this could have been the prequel to Anno Dracula, right? Because Anno Dracula starts with, we're already in the world where Dracula's in charge. We're already in the world where vampires are everywhere. The way the vampires worked in Anno Dracula was very different. They had consciences and souls, and they could make decisions, and they didn't just automatically get switched to the evil mindset. So that was different. But as far as like how Dracula took over, it feels to me like maybe this author was a fan of Anno Dracula, and he was like, but how did it come about? So Anno Dracula's premise is like, what if Dracula didn't get defeated and he took over? Whereas this author's like, well, what if he did get defeated, but then he came back and he took over? And that's where he goes with this. And if his real name is Kim, I can see why he didn't want to use it, because the similarities were really there. Like everything about how Dracula got to power. But see, the thing was, once Dracula got to power, he was only in power for like 10 days before they defeated him. Once he finally showed up, he was not around for very long. Whereas in Anno Dracula, he's in power for years and years and years before he's finally defeated. So I feel like at least that gives Dracula a bit more credit, because in this, they're just like, nope, off him really quick. Anno Dracula has a benefit of being batshit insane. Well, this book sure got batshit insane by the end, but it didn't start batshit insane, so that we did have that tone shift, which is probably why I didn't like it, because I was on board with the tone at the beginning. Like, I was reading it, I was like, oh, I bet people are going to say this is really slow, really dull, but if you know that kind of writing style, and if you're on board for the pastiche of that, I was just like, no, I admire it. This guy is doing a really good job of emulating that writing style. And I think he has a great vocabulary, and I think he has a good handle on the way people from this time period would talk and think, and the way they would use, you know, metaphors or turns of phrase and that kind of stuff. And I really liked that in the journal entries and everything from the beginning part of the book, and then it just kind of lost it going through. I mean, I wouldn't call this book Anno Dracula fanfic at all. I would call it maybe loosely inspired by, if that, or coincidentally, two guys had similar ideas about Dracula, because they're very obvious ideas to have. Like, even if he'd never read Anno Dracula at all, I could see someone reading Dracula and being like, what if? And coming to very similar conclusions, because they're very logical progressions of ideas based on what Dracula sets up, and the pop culture idea of Dracula sets up, the way Dracula has been adapted by cinema and everything in the world since then. You should write your own Dracula sequel, friend. You should. We should all write Dracula sequels, because Dracula is public domain. He is ours for the writing. Stoker made sure that Quincy was born 10 months after the death of Dracula to make absolutely sure no one thought Dracula was dead. No, Quincy was born a year after Dracula was dead. A year to the day. Who else wants a vampire mommy? I don't know. I'd rather be the vampire mommy than have a vampire mommy. Thank you. Well, Dracula was still Quincy's father in this, because he did something to Mina that stayed with her in a way that she passed on to Quincy. But why? I don't know, because he ends up taking Mina anyway, so why couldn't she have been the vessel? She was already a character we knew and cared about. The kid was barely in this, barely used at all, so if you're going to make a big deal out of the kid, at least use him. And that bugged me. Also, the fact, as I mentioned before, at the end of Dracula, when Dracula is defeated, Mina has been tainted by the vampire, right? They touched her with a communion wafer on her forehead. It left a big old burn mark on her forehead. As soon as Dracula dies, that burn mark fades away, and her forehead is clear and virginal again. So we know that any influence Dracula had on her physically dissolved as he turned to ash and died. So whatever he put in her to infuse her that she passed on to Quincy when she gave birth to him should have dissolved and died the same way that burn mark on her forehead did. So that's what annoyed me about the way this tried to contrive Quincy into being Dracula's son in a way. I mean, I'm all for Quincy having two dads, but that was not a good way to do it. With all the political overtones, I'm still unsure what the ending meant with Mina. Yeah, so if the political overtones is that anyone who's been tainted by this ideology, you know, anyone who's been like red pilled or whatever, you know, is irredeemable and just needs to be slain, and we're just gonna cut off their heads and destroy them. There's no like converting them back to maybe being nice people. But Mina's okay. We'll keep Mina. Like, we'll make special exceptions for people that we love, but the other people in the world, even little children, like they talk about an 8-year-old boy vampire that they just had to cut off their head. And they're like, it was so sad, and I hated that even children were being affected by this political ideology. How dare people teach their children things? Yeah, whatever they're going for with Mina at the end was just like... And then they all just like turn a blind eye when she's like the person at the table who's still the vampire, and she's sitting there drinking blood at the table from her husband in front of them, and they all like look away. It's like having Thanksgiving dinner with your one like really racist uncle, and he's saying like really racist things at the Thanksgiving table, and you're all looking away instead of, you know, doing something about it. And I'm like, what are you trying to tell us, book? Mina represents the white woman supporting Trump that gets forgiven by society because of latent patriarchy bullshits. I mean, you know, not that far off. Dracula the Undead similar or different to Dracula's Child? It's been a long time since I read Dracula the Undead. I think it's similar in cheesiness, because Dracula the Undead also had very sexy lady vampires being super sexy, like that kind of like cheesiness, but plot wise it's not similar. Yeah, Mina was treated so strangely in this book. Was she the protagonist or not? Why didn't Dracula care more about her in the end? Yeah, she's set up as the protagonist. She's the first point of view we read. I mean, I feel like it's supposed to be her and Maurice as dual protagonists, but by the end they're both kind of put to the side, and by the end we've got Jonathan and Seward and maybe the kid kind of as our protagonists. And it's just like, they were not set up that way. You know, not every book needs to have one consistent protagonist. There are different book formulas that exist, but my main problem by the end was that I was not connecting with any of the characters. I didn't care about any of the characters. By the time like every single character we met was getting turned into a vampire, I'm like, it happens. Of course the author is gonna like kill off characters. You gotta kill off characters for drama. But there is no one that I was just like feeling for and caring for and like wanting to survive, because everyone by the end was just like, yep, we lost that one too, I guess it's a tragedy. And there was no one that I as the reader was really here for, because even Seward, who like meant well, you know, he briefly loses his mind, and it's very hard for a reader to connect with a mentally ill character who's just like super crazy, and then all of a sudden he's better, and it's just like, you know. And then Jonathan, who's just like horrible, he wasn't like abusive, he wasn't like a bad husband that way, but he had this horrible relationship with his wife, and there was this no connection, and we were seeing everything from the wife's point of view. So how am I supposed to connect to him if she can't connect to him? And now I'm supposed to connect with him at the end. And I did like that he kind of pulled it together and became, you know, competent at the end, and like did his best and did the right thing. But I wasn't here for him. Like, he wasn't my guy, you know. Where do I get my jewelry? Most of it's gifts. I get wonderful gifts. This is my bat necklace. These are my bat earrings. These earrings were given to me by Dacre Stoker, great grandnephew to Bram Stoker, as a thank you for all the work that we have done together, which you have seen on my channel. If the book kept Jonathan as Dracula's queer fascination, then I would understand. But it was cut, so why the focus on him in the end? What's his relationship with Dracula if that's cut? That's a good question, friend. That's a good question. Jonathan's like whole story arc was, I'm scared, I am weak, I'm traumatized, I'm suffering from PTSD, I'm self-medicating with alcohol, but I'm going to pull it together to save my son and my wife, because once they're taken from me, then I realize that they're worth saving. And also the country and also the world is worth saving. So he just sort of became this like, well, if I don't do this, I'm evil, and I'm not evil, so I'm going to do it kind of situation. And he didn't really have that much of like a personal arc or stake in it. And he's very hard to connect to. And it, like at the end, you hear like, oh, he's still drinking, but he only has 1 glass of wine instead of 6. So he's trying. And I'm like, dude, I'd still have 6 glasses of wine. Like, his alcoholism was not the problem. It was the attitude. I know, my camera has a mind of its own. I'm sorry, I could go over here. See if it follows me. It might. Go over here. Yep, see? It just wants to see you to see the rest of my room here, I guess. The oldest vampire you can think of is Russell Edgerton from True Blood, who's 4,000. Are you talking about the oldest vampires that you can think about? What are you replying to? If you want to talk about old vampires, I can talk to you about old vampires. Elder or senile vampires? Oh, you mean like a vampire who was an old person when they were made? That's a bit off topic. Maybe we can talk about that later. Mike, I don't know how to turn off the tracking thing on my camera. I wish I could, because I'm like, there's certain things in my background I don't want you to see, because, you know, I cleaned my room, but over there it's a little bit messy. Come back this way, camera, please. Let's see if it listens to me. This could work as a comedy, like Carpe Jugulin. This was very much not meant to be a comedy. How old are the Atlantis vampires? Are you talking about Anne Rice with the Atlantis vampires? I know we're on a delay. Now I have to wait for you to answer me. You should reread Dracula to write your fanfic. Yes, rereading Dracula is always a good thing. I'm almost out of my drink. Okay. Thank you for joining me on the ride that was Dracula's Child. It was a ride. It was a bit of a thicker book. I'm sorry that our book club was delayed this month. I was supposed to do it a little bit early, actually, because I was going to a convention on the day that we were supposed to have book club of the 13th. It was a Mensa convention. I am a member of Mensa, and we have conventions. It's a thing we do. But I have finally convinced my mother to join Mensa, because my mother is very smart, and she's always wanted to join. So I finally convinced her to join, and she lives in Florida. So Florida was doing a convention, and I was like, Mom, you should go. And so I decided I would take her to this Florida, her very first Mensa convention. So that's what I went to do on the 13th. So we were going to have book club before that, but my fledgling Spawn's daycare school had a COVID outbreak the week before that, and they shut down school. My Spawn did not catch COVID. She is fine. She's 2 years old. But she was here with me, so I could not like read the book in time before the Mensa convention. So I had to put off book club until after the Mensa convention. And that's why we're late. But it gave me more time to read this giant book. It was actually a faster read than you might expect from a book that's 500 and a half pages long, almost 600 pages long, because a lot of them are like newspaper articles and diary entries, so there's a lot of blank space in the book. So, you know, you have a lot of like chapter ends. It's not just walls and walls of text. There's a lot of pages that look like this. So I would say this book is maybe 2/3 as long as it seems, because of all the blank space that you actually have. You miss the good old days when I played Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines? Well, now I'm playing Vampire the Masquerade Shadows of New York. You should just watch that series. It is fun. So, wow, it's already 10 o'clock. Like, usually we stop at 10 o'clock, right? But we haven't even talked about next month's book to read. This was a big book to recap, right? So next month, what are we reading? What has the book club voted on? Lost Girls by Sonia Hartle. Hurtle. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So this book was just given to me by one of you. It showed up at my P.O. box, and when I was putting up the vote for the next book club, I had 2 other books. I tried to put up 3 books for the vote, and I had 2 other books. I didn't know what to put them up with, and this book showed up in my P.O. box, and it worked with the theme I was going for, which was kind of like shorter, since we just read a big book. More recent books that have just come up within the past year. And this book won the vote. Surprisingly, the brand new book that just came to my P.O. box that one of you sent me. So thank you very much. The Lost Girls is obviously a play on the movie The Lost Boys, which is famous for being about vampires and being super, super, super 80s. And the Lost Boys are very sexy teenage vampire heartthrobs. Kind of. They're also kind of creepy. So I'm assuming this is The Lost Girls will be set in the 80s and have sexy girl heartthrobs. That is my assumption just based on the title. I know it is a YA novel, so about teenagers. Yes. The back doesn't say much, but all it says is getting over your vampire ex is as easy as killing him and stealing his girlfriend. Oh, that means it might also be kind of queer, which you know I'm always down for. One of the things about Dracula's Child that I was most excited for was the gay plot, which was advertised in the book. And I like that it did have gay characters, even though it did not address the homoeroticism between Dracula and Jonathan or Dracula and Renfield, anything that was in the original book. Dracula was not gay at all. I did like that there were gay characters that were treated with respect. You know, we had good ones, we had bad ones. It was a nice gamut. Goodbye, drink. Let me tell you about the Lost Girls. Holly Little has been stuck with crimped hair since 1987, when she agreed to let her boyfriend, Elton, turn her into a vampire. But when he ditches her at a gas station a few decades into their eternity together, she realizes that being young forever actually means working graveyard shifts at Taco Bell, sleeping in seedy motels, and being supernaturally compelled to follow your ex from town to town. At least until Holly meets Elton's other exes. It seems that Holly isn't the only girl Elton seduced into this wretched existence. He turned Ida in 1921. Then Rose in 1954, and he abandoned them both before Holly was even born. Now, Rose and Ida want to kill him before he can trick another girl into eternal adolescence, and they'll need Holly's help to do it. And once Holly starts falling for Elton's vulnerable new conquest, Parker, she'll do anything to save her. To kill Elton for good, Holly and her friends will have to dig up their pasts, rob a bank, and reconcile with the people they've hurt and their search for eternal love. And to win the girl, Holly will have to convince Parker that she's more than just Elton's crazy ex, even though she is trying to kill him. So it doesn't sound like it's set in the 80s, but the main character, Holly, is from the 80s, so I feel like there's going to be some like 80s vibes in it. And she and Parker are going to have this romance while they're trying to kill Elton, their evil vampire master. And then, you know, if it follows Lost Boys at all the vampires will turn back human again after the master vampire is dead. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they'll just be like gay vampires together for the rest of the time. It's a very short book, very quick read. This book came out, I think, last year or the year before. Let's see. Let me find the date for you. 2021. Yeah. And it is by Page Street Publishing, and it is a young adult novel, so you know it'll probably be a lighter, easier read. Ha! 6, but with murder. Like 6 didn't have murder? One guy's exes team up to murder him. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But based on the like very pretty cover, I'm assuming it's kind of lighthearted and it won't be too tragic. That is what we're reading. You have until February 13th to read it, which is a Sunday, I think. So we probably won't have our book club on the 13th. Yeah, we'll probably have our book club on the 16th. Because I have choir practice on the other 2 days. I sing in a choir. I joined a choir. You should know. Okay, I live in the city of Charlotte, North Carolina, and Charlotte has a LGBTQ choir that I just joined, and we are working on some new music that is very exciting. And I have choir practice now on usually Tuesdays, but that week I have it on Monday and Tuesdays. And I'm singing in the gay choir with my fellow gay singers, and it will be fun. So you have until February 16th to read this book, and then we will have our live stream, which is plenty of time because it is a nice, quick, easy read of a book. And think about what you want to read next. If you have suggestions for what you want to read next, either a specific book or a specific genre or style of book, please join my Discord and mention it in the book club suggestions channel. And let me know what you want to read after this book, because we just read this like Gothic Victorian pastiche epistolary novel, and I want to do something very different style-wise. So now we're reading this like fluffy young adult novel about murder girlfriends, you know. So what should we read next? Some very different kind of genre or style of book. Open to suggestions. Please bring your suggestions to the Discord. The link to join the book club Discord is in the description of this video. You do not have to actually read the book to join the Discord or the book club. You just have to join, and you can listen to us talk about the books. If you don't want to read it, that is always fine. We are here to read the books for you, but you can see what other people are saying about the books and join and have fun with us. We also talk about other vampire things in the Discord. It is, I would say it's a vampire Discord server. I mean, it's a me Discord server, so it's mostly vampire related, but we'll talk about anything that's like tangentially related to interests that I would have. So anything like spooky, gothic, maybe political. Like we have a Phantom of the Opera channel. We have like an Anne Rice specific channel. We'll talk about Anne Rice until the cows come home. That kind of thing in our Discord server. Share your memes. Come have fun. There's about 600 people in the Discord server, but only about 30 ever talk, so it's actually pretty chill and calm. It's not a super active Discord server. You won't get like overwhelmed there. Come talk about your games. Talk about gaming. Sorry, I'm playing with an air plant. My brother gave us a bunch of air plants for Christmas. You want to see all my air plants? He gave us a bunch, but these are just like a few. Aren't they cute? Oh, wait, here's another one. Love air plants. They're so mysterious. How do they work? I don't know. Just gotta mist them once in a while. Oh, you think we should read the Book of Nod for book club? I have it. I do. Because you sent it to me. We could read the Book of Nod for book club. It's very short, though. I don't know if that would be substantial enough for a book club read. Maybe we could read it in addition to something else. People keep sending me Warhammer books. Maybe we should read a Warhammer book for book club. You see all these books behind me? This is maybe half of my vampire books. The other half are over there where you can't see. Unless the camera wants to pan over there and show you. But any book that I've ever shown in one of my book videos, I've made like 17 of them so far. If there is a book that I've shown that you really want to read, mention it in book club and I'll put it up for a vote, because people don't suggest things that often. So if you suggest it, I'm very likely to include it. I think we should read a book with vampires. I agree. We should read a book with vampires. Dowry of Blood. Okay, I'll look that one up. Vampire noir? You mean as a genre? We just read some vampire noir recently with Certain Dark Things, or is that the title of a book? It was the title of the book. You have to tell me who it's by. I am here to read books I already own. I'm not going to go out and get a new book for this book club. I have 400 vampire books I need to read. That's the point. If there's a book that you want to read for a book club that I don't own, you can send it to me. People send me books all the time. That's where I got all these books in the first place. I have a P.O. box. The address is in the description of this video. So there you go. People send me their books that they wrote as authors because, you know, you should all write vampire books. I try to choose books for the book club that I think other members of my club can easily get from libraries or stuff. So if it's a more rare book, I might not suggest that for book club as much as some of the other more readily accessible books. A book that people could purchase off of Amazon or get from their library. Not that we want to support Amazon. It is evil. But I know that people need to accommodate their finances. You know, it is a privilege to boycott Amazon, and not everybody has that privilege. Summer of Night by Dan Simmons would be a great book for the club. Thank you. Noted. Have I heard of the Vanitas anime? I have not. I like vampire anime. Empire of the Vampire. You know, I almost suggested Empire of the Vampire for this book club for this month, but I wanted to pick a shorter book, and that's a big book. It is a big adult vampire novel. It's not even YA to make it like lighter or an easier read, so I wanted to maybe save that for a month where I knew I would have more time. Vampirates looks pretty interesting. I do have all the Vampirates. Can you see them there on... Sorry, I'm trying to like get out of the way. All the Vampirates on the bottom of my vampire shelf over there. Yeah, we could read the first book in that. I'm always sort of wary about reading children's books for book club because I want to make sure I'm reading something that everyone will like. But once in a while, we can read a children's book for sure. The one just called Blood Countess. I have 4 separate books called Blood Countess. So if you want to read a book called Blood Countess, you need to tell me which one you're talking about. Because I have multiple books that are vampire books and books just about Elizabeth Bathory, which she was not literally a vampire, but they're about her and they're vampire adjacent. So I have them 4 separate books called Blood Countess. So make sure you tell me which one you're talking about. 400 books for book club is only 33 years and 4 months at 1 book a month. Thank you, Pierre Jerome Bergeron, for doing that math for me. I love that. 33 years of book club. Are we down? How old will I be in 33 years? I'll be 70. I could do this book club till I'm 70, right? Yeah. What about diving back into Ravenloft? I have thought of it because I do have Vampire of the Mists. And I was actually considering putting that up sometime soon. Vampire of the Mists. Because, you know, if we're going to, like, go back to that whole realm. Vampire Countess by Lena Popovic is not about vampires, just FYI. Good to know. Thank you, because you're never sure reading the descriptions, right? Is there anything better than Let the Right One In, you know? Given that Let the Right One In is in my top 3 vampire books, and those 3 are sort of matched, not like in any particular order, I would say there is not anything better than Let the Right One In. Vampires didn't drink blood? What kind of vampire book is that? We should all pick an aristocratic vampire title. Like, each of us gets a different title, like, I'm Duke and you're Lord, or we all get the same title. Vampires are having resurgence in anime. Thank you. I did watch Vampire Knight on Netflix because it is there, and I did enjoy it, as silly as it is. I'd love to do book club for 33 years. I mean, I might. What else am I going to do with my life, right? Salem's Lot of Vlasic. Is a Vlasic a vampire classic? No, I did put Salem's Lot up for vote for Vampire Book Club 1 month, and people didn't choose it. They chose something different. I will put it back up again. Along with Stephen King's other vampire book, which is Dr. Sleep. But I haven't read The Shining. I'm like, do I need to read The Shining first? I don't know. A signed copy. Ooh, thank you. George R. R. Martin did write a vampire novel called Fever Dream, spelled the French way, Fevre. And I did put that up for vote too, alongside Salem's Lot, and neither of them were chosen. I forget what we chose that month. Was that the month we chose Anno Dracula? Maybe. I think it might have been like, this is my white dude month or something like that. 33 years if Maven never gets another book, which is highly unlikely. I agree. People send me books all the time. Sometimes they send me movies. Someone sent me a DVD set of 20 classic vampire movies, which I just got from my P.O. box yesterday, which I'm like very excited about. Like very, very classic, like 1930s and 40s and 50s classic movies. Love it. Vlasic was a typo. Yes, I love it. No, it's perfect. Doctor Sleep is a mage book, not vampires. Well, I have been told multiple times that it is vampire, so I think it's probably one of those like vampire open to interpretation kind of things, maybe. The new Vampire the Masquerade card game is fun. I didn't know there was a new Vampire the Masquerade card game. Angela Sommer Bodenberg ended her Little Vampire series, like just recently? I didn't even know it was still going. I did a video on the Hollywood movie version of The Little Vampire, and I didn't really like it very much. I thought it didn't have a good message for children or vampires. And Angela Sommer Bodenberg apparently didn't like the movie either, because she emails me, or she has her husband email me, and she's like, hey, I saw your video. And, well, no. Actually, she emailed Doug Walker and was like, can you please contact Elisa and tell her this? So Doug Walker emails me, and he's like, this German lady's emailing me. So she emails me, and she's like, I liked your video. I really appreciate it. I'd like to send you a copy of a book as a thank you for your child, because my kid was in that video. And she did. And she, like, I gave her my address, and she mailed me a signed copy of one of her books in English, as well as, like, a postcard and some swag and some really nice things. She wrote me this really nice letter, and she was just so super sweet. And I was like, all I did was say this Hollywood movie version of your books kind of sucks because it doesn't follow the spirit of the books very well. And she's like, I agree. That's my Angela Sommer Bodenberg story. Vampire Schwestern? Or The Vampire Sisters? A hilarious German vampire movie. Never heard of it. All right. What time is it? We've been talking a lot tonight. 10:15 already. 15 minutes past how we usually go. This is your chance to ask me any other questions you want to hear my answers to. Any other things that you specifically want to mention, either about Dracula's Child, The Lost Girls, vampires in general, me, my Discord server, Anne Rice, because we always end up talking about her. May she rest in peace. Or my air plants. I'm afraid they're going to die. I'm not very good at keeping plants alive. Not very good at all. I try. Have you ever watched the movie Interview with a Vampire? If you do, you will notice that their flat, their Rue Royale house, apartment, townhouse, is full of plants. Like, why do these vampires have so many plants in their house? I don't know. It's tropical and New Orleansy. So I'm like, I too want to have so many plants in my house like Louis and Lestat did. Yes, please. So I went to... not Home Depot because they support the Trump campaign. So I went to Lowe's and I bought a bunch of houseplants. So I bought some like palm trees and like other things that are supposed to grow indoors. But they're like, these plants need lots of light, even though they're indoor plants. And I was like, I have no light. I'm a vampire. Everything's dark in my house. So I'm trying to find plants that will actually grow in my house. So I bought a bunch of house plants and I brought them home. And I was like, yes, I want my house to be full of tropical plants like Louis and Lestat's house. Trying to keep them alive. A lot of them are dying. I'm not doing a very good job, but I'm trying and I'm learning, right? So no, I did not name the plants. So one of the ladies at Lowe's told me that ferns were very easy to care for. They needed low light. They were good for that. So I bought 2 ferns and I potted them and everything. I bought pots, bought the right soil, and they just like shriveled up and died on me. And so I email my mom, who's a horticulturist and like, you know, a botanist, and she knows plants. It's like her degree is in plants. And she's just like, you need humidity for ferns. They're too dry. You need to mist them every day. Put them in your bathroom. They don't need light, but they need moisture. And I was like, there's no moisture here. It's dry as the Sahara. What are you talking about? So my fern shriveled up and died. Thank you, Lindsay P, for the $4.99. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for supporting this book club. This book club is free. The Discord is free. Like, ostensibly it's subsidized by my Patreon, because my Patreon supports everything because it pays my bills, but I don't like literally charge for these videos or this book club. So thank you very much. Any little bit helps. I really appreciate it. The Savage Garden, yes. Lestat Savage Garden, which is a metaphor, not a literal garden. Have I tried plastic plants? My partner Paul refuses to have plastic plants. He will only have real plants. He will not have plastic plants in this house. How was the vampire ball on Halloween? Did I meet any of my viewers? I have already talked about the vampire ball in previous book club live streams, but I will talk about it again. It was great. I loved it. I did not meet any of my viewers. Nobody at the vampire ball seemed to recognize me or know who I was, which is fine. We were all there just to have a vampire-y good time. It was wonderful. It was a beautiful venue. I'm definitely going again next year. If someone was there and noticed me but was too shy to come say hi to me, I get it. It's fine. But please try next time because I would love to meet you. The Lost Girls book is inspired by The Lost Boys, but it's not actually anything to do with it. You know, I'm kind of fine with that. I think that's the best way to do about it, to be like, it's got the feel of The Lost Boys. If you like Lost Boys, you will also like Lost Girls, but it's not trying to like follow it in any way or be bound to it in any way. I think that's the best way to do something like that. What is my favorite Anne Rice book that is non-Vampire Chronicles or Witches trilogy? Cry to Heaven. No. Mummy. No. Cry to Heaven. No. Mummy. I don't know. Can I have two? Cry to Heaven I feel is more like good. Mummy is more fun. They're both really good, though. I recently read Violin, which is probably, I feel, her most important non-vampires and witches book, but it's not fun to read. Like, oh, it is hard to read. But Mummy is fun. Mummy is super fun. And Cry to Heaven, as an opera singer, I'm just like, yes, my people, I love it. Italian opera, yes. And it's like a murder revenge story. So, you know, but yeah, those two. Saddest vampire death scene ever. Oh, that's going to take some research. I can't answer that off the cuff. Other than Claudia dying, I mean, come on. You know, obvious answer. If Paul doesn't know the plants are plastic. You know, Paul does have trouble noticing things. Paul is a very severe ADHD. I bet I could get that by him. It runs in the family. Plastic plants is Vengula for the count. Vengula for the Chocula. Can we read Necroscope? So I've already read Necroscope, and for Vampire Book Club, I'm trying to focus on books I have not already read. However, it has been about 12 years since I've read Necroscope, so maybe I could stand to read it again. So maybe, now that I finally have a copy, Necroscope is actually kind of hard to find in print. You can get an ebook copy pretty easily, so I think it would be okay for the book club, but I'd wanted a print copy because I had read Necroscope by borrowing it from a partner I had at the time. And when we separated, that partner kept their copy of Necroscope. So I did not have a copy. But finally, my dad gave it to me for Christmas. Not this year, but like the previous year. So now I actually have a copy of Necroscope that I could reread. I don't remember loving Necroscope, but I do remember thinking it was okay, and a lot of times over the years of doing vampire reviews, whenever usually dudes come to me and are like, oh, vampires are so girly or so gay, and I am just like a cis het man, and what vampire is for me? And I'm like, friend, Necroscope is for you. Go read Necroscope. That's the book for you. And so I recommend it often to people that want like dude-tastic vampires. And that's like what stuck with me most about it, but not in a way that I disliked in any way. Like, I did like it for what it was. What's a vampire book that I desperately want to read for book club? I don't think I desperately want to read anything, but things that are high on my list are probably George R. R. Martin's book, Salem's Lot, like those sort of like classic things. But I'm also kind of intimidated by them because they are very big, and I feel like they'll be very heavy conversations. So I'm like, book club could just be easy this month, or are we going to do the serious month? And like every month it seems like there's something going on, right? And so like maybe we'll pick an easy month. Oh, Paul's listening to us. He hears about the fake plants. Y'all ruined it. What opera would I love to play? Well, Marriage of Figaro is my favorite, and I've always wanted to be Cherubino. That would be my dream role in any opera. But like, I love anything Mozart. Puccini's fun because he's easy, but like Verdi's like where it's at, right? Like, I don't know. We're not here to talk about opera. We're here to talk about vampires. I did see a vampire opera. Paul and I went to go see The Vampire, which I think was supposed to be loosely inspired by Polydori's, but it wasn't a very good opera in that like none of the music stuck with me, but it was a vampire opera. They exist. What's a vampire book I'm dreading to read? Other than the ones that seem like really big and intimidating? I don't know. Maybe like the sequels to famous books. Like we read A Discovery of Witches. We read Anno Dracula, but like they all have like 16 sequels, right? And like I have them because people sent them to me and they're like, I'm a big fan of this and you should read it. And I'm like, I want to support you and, like the things that you like. But I also have like shelves full of sequels to vampire novels that I didn't necessarily love, but were okay, where I found interesting points in, but didn't love. And now I have like 6 sequels to each of those novels. Like, am I going to read those sequels? So I wouldn't say I'm dreading, but maybe they seem a bit more daunting to me. Heavy book 1 month and a couple of palate cleanses. I mean, that's kind of what we've been doing. And I feel like this month maybe was a heavier book than I thought it was going to be. Just in the size of it and like the whole like Victorian pasticheness of it. Like it did turn into kind of a zany romp by the end, but Have I ever read the short story collection called The Ultimate Dracula? I've read pieces that are in that collection, but I've never read the full collection. And we did just read a vampire short story collection last month, but I do have many other vampire short story collections that I do want to put up for future months. I've read Favorite Fangs, Nothing Can Be Worse. That is true. Okay, so at the Mensa convention that I went to a couple weeks ago, there was a panel that was about, like, for book lovers. There was this literary society that the Floridians do. So they're like, come to this literary society book club meeting and be prepared to talk about 3 books you love and 1 book you don't love. And I was like, I don't know what books to talk about. I don't know books. So I show up and I'm like, 3 books I love. How can I choose? Because, me. But for the book I didn't love, the book I wound up talking about was Favorite Fangs. And when I was trying to describe it to this panel full of nerds, they were like, that sounds hilarious. Why didn't you love it? And I was like, no, you guys don't understand. You don't understand. And I couldn't make them understand why this book was so bad. I know I've read them many times, but I'd actually love to do a book club on Interview with a Vampire or Vampire Lestat sometime to discuss it live with everyone. I've reread the Vampire Lestat many times and I've done a video about it. So I feel like that's done. But for Interview with the Vampire, it has been a very long time since I've read that book. I've read the comic book a lot because every time I want to go back and remember something, I just go to the comic book instead. But I feel like we could reread that book. And I have been rereading the Vampire Chronicles over the past 2 years via audiobook, which I never listen to audiobooks usually, but for the past few years I've done a lot of road trips, so I was like, okay, I'll listen to audiobooks of books I've already read, which is the Vampire Chronicles. So I've been listening. Of the 15 Vampire Chronicles that exist, I've probably listened to maybe like 10 of those audiobooks, but Interview isn't one I've listened to or reread in many, many years. So we could do that for Vampire Book Club as sort of like a refresher for me. Not that I'm unfamiliar with the story, but there's probably a lot of little tiny moments in that book that I don't remember very well, which would be good for me to sort of refresh myself on. Because as I've reread all of the Anne Rice Vampire Chronicles canon, I've sort of fashioned myself into an expert upon that canon, to the point where people come to me now with questions about like tiny details about canon. Like today someone asked, when did Lestat learn how to read? And I'm like, I know exactly where that is. And I just like go to my phone and I pull up the passage and I copy and paste it, and I know exactly what they're talking about. So they say that if you spend 15 minutes a day working on something, you will be an expert in like X amount of time, right? So I was like, I could be an expert on Anne Rice Vampire Chronicles. And that's like the chosen path I've made for myself, which is totally useless and will get me nowhere in this world, but it's what I do. So yeah, I'm here for that. Oh, good night, JRL Studios. Thank you for joining us. Do I have any of the Vampire the Masquerade novels? I do, because you have sent them to me. And I've talked about them in my books videos. I do have some of them. I have the Toreador novel, specifically. I have the Book of Nod, a few others. When the TV series starts, the Vampire Chronicles TV series for Interview with the Vampire. Yeah, it would be timely and topical for us to do it then. That might be a good idea. I think that's starting in the fall. So the Vampire Chronicles TV series is currently filming in New Orleans right now, and I have friends with several people who are actors, and they are auditioning for roles to be extras in that series, and they're getting the parts. And they haven't gone and filmed it yet, but they're going soon. More than one person are going down to New Orleans to film these parts as extras in the Vampire Chronicles series. I'm like, I want to do it too. I could like take some pictures of myself and put them on this website and be like, I want to be an extra in the Vampire Chronicles TV series, and see if they cast me, and then like just drive down to New Orleans and be like, I'm here to film a scene in your TV series. I really want to do it, but I also like have a life and responsibilities and stuff. I just joined the gay choir. I have to go sing in the gay choir. I can't just leave and go film TV series. Have I read The Fledgling by Octavia E. Butler? That's a sci-fi vampire novel. I have, Kenny writes, and I have done a whole video on it in which I expressed very many opinions. It is on my channel, and you should go watch my video on Octavia Butler's book Fledgling, because I was proud of that video, and I thought I did a good job. Are the Vampire the Masquerade novels as bad as vampire novels, as D&D novels are as bad as fantasy novels? It depends. They're all different. Alright. I keep dropping my air plants on the floor. I'm sorry. I'm like petting it like a cat, right? I'm like, yes, my precious, precious. I'm probably killing the plant slowly. I need to stop doing that. It is 10:30. We have gone on long enough, I think, about vampire nonsense. Yes, you've apparently missed videos, Kenny writes. Go watch my video on Octavia Butler's Fledgling. I wear a white corset. And we are reading next month The Lost Girls by Sonia Hartle, author of hashtag not your hashtag love story. Very YA, very teenager. Join the Discord server if you haven't already. There is a zero pressure Discord server. You do not have to actually read the book to join the book club, but you can just listen to us talk about the book club. It is fun. Did I know they're making a TV series for Fledgling? I have heard that. And I am very curious how they're going to pull that off, because that is a very uncomfortable book to adapt with a lot of adult/child sex. We'll see how that works. And on that note, I hope you all have a wonderful January. I will see you back here February 16th. We've agreed for the Vampire Book Club meeting of Lost Girls. In the meantime, enjoy yourselves. Be safe. Be healthy. We're all friends here, right? Until then, I wish you the best. Happy vampires. Good night.